Okay, in this video, we're going to talk about how to use the sampler. And in our lab, we have the Ableton Live Standard edition installed. And so that has a very basic sampler installed called Simpler. And remember that samplers are essentially just MIDI synthesizers or MIDI instruments that instead of generating a sound with some sort of algorithm or waveform, we are using an audio file to trigger with your MIDI instructions or your MIDI sequences. So to do this, you are going to load a MIDI instrument into your session view, or your arrangement view, either one. Let's remind ourselves of some of these functions. So remember that tab will toggle between session and arrangement view, right? We have play, stop, and record. We have our overdub function. We have our loop record function or loop playback on the arrangement view function. And we're going to use those same things. Remember this too, up on the top is going to give us our record and playback loop region, our loop ribbon up here. So these things are going to help us kind of build another layer to our sequence. And right now, from the last video, so the first video we did some drum sequencing, the second one we did some other layers here, and so finally in the third one we're going to add a sampler. And so I'm going to drag the simpler, I'll play on the words simple sampler, of course, into our arrangement view. That's found in the instruments folder under simpler. And if you open this up, it has a lot of pre-loaded samples. I would rather us build our own. So I'm going to go over here to a blank simpler. I'm not going to select any of these subcategories. I'm just going to take simpler from here and drag it right over into our arrangement view. And if I make it bigger, like I do all the other ones, and I press a key on my MIDI keyboard, I don't get any sort of response because it's looking for an audio file to trigger with my MIDI keyboard. So on our course website, I have the Firebird Suite chord that is most famous from Orchestra Hit. The Orchestra Hit, of course, was made famous in the 1980s with the use of the Fairlight CMI sampler keyboard and workstation, and it was taken from Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. And so I've got this sample edited for us to use. So Firebird 5 is the wave file that is on our learning on D2L. And so you're going to download that, and you can basically drag that wave file. Here, let me go ahead and show this in my Finder window so that it's easy to see here. 1 second. So it's easy to see how this is done. So from Finder, right, I've downloaded Firebird 5 from the website, and I can download this right from the Finder window right into this black region down here in Simpler. So let me do this again. So remember that I brought Simpler into my arrangement view. So it's blank, a blank Simpler. I'm going to go over here to Finder, and I'm going to go here to Downloads. And here's Firebird 5. I'm going to drag that right over here into this region down here. Otherwise, it won't do anything. So now that I've got an audio file loaded in here, now when I press a MIDI key, it's going to trigger the beginning of that sample. So traditionally, you could do this sort of however you want to, but if it won't continue to play unless I hold the key down. But another way to do this is through one shot, which is similar to the MPC, where if you just hit the pad or hit the key, it'll play the whole sample. So you can turn on one shot mode, where no matter how long you press the MIDI key, it will play the whole sample. So notice that this will track This will track up the scale as I play the scale. And so this allows me to basically change pitch. Okay, so if that's the case, then I can make a MIDI sequence that also is rhythmic and is quantized. And so I'm going to turn on, I'm going to remind us how to turn on record quantization, edit, record quantization, and then I'm going to choose 16th note quantization. I have my ribbon selector up here at the top set to 2 measures. I'm going to hit stop twice so that my playback line goes all the way to the beginning, and you can barely see it over there, it's blue. I'm going to make sure that my overdub is enabled and my loop is enabled for basically loop records. And I'm going to hit record here. And because my Firebird 5 audio file is loaded into Simpler, that is named my track now, Firebird 5, after the sample that's loaded in here. Okay, I've record enabled my track. I'm going to hit record. It's going to count me off. Okay, so I recorded a rhythmic moment, really, I guess, where I played the chord into my sequencer, but I don't really like how it sounds, so I'm going to edit that. In order for me to hear how it sounds when I move it around, I'm going to click this little tiny headphone button, and now I'm getting a bit of I'm getting a aural feedback of how I change. So let me see how that sounds. It's a little bit more in line. So now I know that's a D sharp 3. Oh, I don't have record. I'm hitting play, sorry. So if I hit record instead, once again, I don't love this other note, so I'm going to go ahead and take it down to F sharp. Okay, so, and it's not complex, right? We can keep this really simple. So I've got 2 notes that are of different durations, but because it's a one-shot setting over here, it's going to play the whole thing anyway, right? And again, I can change any of these parameters down here to make it, fade in or out, or I can transpose the whole thing. But basically, I kind of like the way it's sounding now, so I'm going to keep it that way. If I go over here and double-click on the title of my region, again, I get my sequencer back. And I can turn on this very important loop button over here, which will allow me to loop it through my arrangement. So if I zoom back out, notice that because this loop button is enabled, I can drag this out and it will align with the rest of my sequence. Great. So this is good enough for me. If I go over here and hit Tab, I can now apply global effects to this sound. Let's say I want some delay. So I want to put some delay on this sound. So I'm going to turn up the knob for delay, which is under the B knob here, the aux send B. And I'm going to turn it up quite a bit just to get a lot of it. And I'm going to solo this so we can hear how it sounds. Now the interesting thing about this delay is that it's got different settings for right and left. Okay, so that'll work. And so if I add this to the rest of the mix, we have a sample that goes right along with the rest of my bass line and my drum sequence. So that's how you use sampler, or the simpler sampler in Ableton. Again, you can drag and load a blank one at any time. You can load any audio file, wave file into this area here. Just keep in mind that the longer that audio file, the harder it'll be to edit. So I recommend editing down larger audio files into in an audio editor like Audacity or something simple to extract just the sounds that you want, so that you're not dealing with this really long 2-minute audio file and trying to find a tiny slice of that. Take the tiny slice out in another audio editor that's much easier to use, and then you can just drag it in here, and it's so much more nimble and easier to deal with. If you're let's see, so you can also sort of change the size of the time in which you trigger that sound. So you can use these arrows and lines to isolate certain parts of your sound. But again, the larger the audio file, the more cumbersome this becomes. So just a word to the wise. Okay, that should be enough. You can also add, of course, other audio effects from these menus to make this more sound really cool. You can add resonators and reverb and all kinds of fun stuff. Let's try something like Stadium. Right, so you can create effects change just for this instrument just by dragging them into this list. And of course, when you're done, you have the ability to create or export your audio. You would then select the amount of audio you want to export, go up to File, Export Audio Video, and then make sure that it is the same amount of time that you've selected up on the top. Go ahead and check your file type. AIF is fine. Encode it as an MP3, turn that on and say export. And we're going to export that to desktop, and we're going to say that we're going to call this Sample Jams. And that's going to go ahead and render it for us. And then you can upload that audio file to the Dropbox. It'll put all of your effects, all of your loops, all of your sequencing together into one cohesive audio file. And if I go over here to my desktop and look for Sample Jams, yeah, I've got an AIF and an MP3. I'm going to hit the space bar and listen to it. Now notice that there's a problem with this. I only got one track, right? So because I only have one track here, because, hey, I've got this soloed. So I only would have known that if I auditioned the track. So it's very important to audition it first. So we go to File, Export Audio Video, do this all again, hit Export. We'll try this Sample Jams again. I'm going to replace the ones I already had. And okay. And finally, it should appear on the desktop again. There's my Sample Jams. And if I audition it again, okay, so that's got everything in it. It's got all of my sounds. It sounds the right way, and so that is what I would upload. Remember to always audition your tracks before you upload them to D2L or before you send them to anybody. Thanks, and let me know if you have any questions.